gentlemen. What a polite audience you are. Normally we have to fight to keep people quiet. So you're either very polite or you're really looking forward to my jokes, which is what made me assume you're just very polite.
I'm just tired.
Yeah, and tired. Yes. Yeah. Can we throw out the hecklers at the front, please? So I hope you had a good lunch, refreshed yourselves, and enjoyed the morning. I thought we had some good, interesting sessions and presentations this morning, and it was good to see that it was forward-looking. There's no point moaning about the past or even moaning about today. What we need to do as an industry is to move forward, and that's what we're looking at. The next session is accelerating innovation, digitalisation, and investment. And that's very easy to say after a lunch, but I'm just glad this session wasn't after the cocktail reception last night, because God knows what this session would have been called as I tried to pronounce it. But again, you know, it's looking at what's out there and what's different, who's doing what. So we're going to hear some different perspectives here from what you might call a traditional logistics service provider, if there's such a thing anymore, an IT technology specialist, and a consulting company to share some of their views on how they can see logistics moving forward and the things that will impact on and make us move, will help us to move forward and will make us move forward. So I'd like to welcome to the podium the first speaker of this afternoon, Achim Glas, the head of Global Automotive Vertical and the Senior VP of Kuehne + Nagel. Thank you, Achim.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes, excellent. Also from my side, a very warm welcome to you guys here in the audience, esteemed co-workers, customers, organizers, but also a warm welcome to the people watching us on the live stream. I know that there are people participating now from other parts of the world. In my capacity of head of the global automotive vertical for Kuehne + Nagel, my particular expertise lies in inbound manufacturing logistics for automotive spare parts, and I have a passion now for battery. And you saw us running around over here, so excuse our etiquette, okay? But we want to make some advertisements for our battery chain solution, which you've seen out there at the booth, and we are so happy that we could hear that many of you guys are interested in that. What is the objective of my presentation? I would like to share with you which are the digital trends which are impacting logistics companies in general. And I would like to share with you how we in Kuehne + Nagel, one of the global leaders in international supply chain management, are dealing with that, and how actually can we exploit digital trends in order to achieve benefits for our customers. I would like to take you on a journey talking about how the world is changing, driven by consumer demand. We then talk about the implications, the transformation of logistics in the future, before we then head into the digital trends in the freight forwarding industry. And then I'm going to give you very specific examples how Kuehne + Nagel is using digital trends and digitalization in our sea freight organization in order to drive innovation and to bring additional business opportunities to customers and to markets, followed by the last chapter where I'm going to be very specific, sharing with you concrete innovations which we are sharing with customers together in our warehouses, with the overall objective to discuss with you how can the future potential warehouse for an automotive logistics company look like. We know the world is fast-paced, but what's actually new to the world, in Kuehne + Nagel's opinion, is that the world is driven by consumer demand. Mobile usage, instantly being available, and eventually the ease of connectivity has become the new norm of the industry. And the lines between business to business and traditional business to consumer activities is getting blurry and blurry. Therefore, we also see that the logistics industry is actually transforming rapidly right now. It's driven by some of the e-commerce giants which are actually setting the pace in logistics. But in Kuehne + Nagel, we believe that the logistics market is actually going to grow over the next couple of years with regards to volumes in sea freight, air freight, and overland, depending on mode of transport, between 3 to 6%. So that's very, very good news. However, the demand patterns of our customers are changing. And they're changing because of what we spoke about before, the new consumer trends, the new consumer demands. So cargo flows are shifting. Where in the past the mature markets in Western Europe or North America were actually importing from China, now China is importing. China's exporting like crazy, but they are also importing. And China actually has become a big consumer market for the Chinese as such. And this is due to the growth of the middle class, particularly in China. So therefore, we see a new trend in patterns and how cargo is flowing and shifting from one part of the world to the other part. And actually, the speed and the quality of execution has become the new demand of the industry. I spoke with some of the fellow participants or delegates from the audience yesterday, where we spoke about providing data to our customers. And if data is 10 minutes old, it's already not good enough anymore. The data must be available instantly at any given point of time. And the same is actually the case in today's industry. We don't expect overnight delivery. You expect same-day delivery. And in fact, if we placed an order on Amazon right now, most likely by the time this presentation slide is over, the product is already available in some of the metropoles of this world and mega cities. So technology is then actually the one which is a game changer for logistics and for consumer demand in the industry. And digitalization, in fact, we refer to the word digitization. And Louis, I have the same challenges as you have. It's a very difficult word to pronunciate. But digitalization, together with automation, is opening up the doors for tremendous opportunities. And I believe that our freight forwarding industry, our logistics industry, also in automotive, we are already behind. I think we could have been much further ahead. And I would like to share with you activities which we are doing in our organization, which hopefully will spark an interesting discussion afterwards. Predominantly, we're talking about productivity improvements. We in Kühne+Nagel, with 70,000 staff workforce, we need to increase our productivity because 40,000 of my colleagues are working in the warehouse. So you can imagine what a quality and what a productivity improvement only of a couple of minutes per process will bring as benefit to us, but eventually to you as a customer. And eventually, we don't have you in mind, we have your customers in mind. So when we talk about pharma shipments, we're not talking about pharma shipment, we're talking about a patient. And when we talk about shipping spare parts to the aftermarket, we are talking about a consumer who's actually expecting and awaiting his cards. So productivity improvements are driving digitalization. It's about the user experience. That's very, very simple. To place an order online, to buy movie tickets, to buy a plane ticket. You know, digitalization opened up the possibility for consumers of the world to have a very, very quick experience. And only last night I returned from the United States West Coast, where on the weekend I went shopping into a big retail shop. And the moment I left the store and I was on the street, I received a Google push alert where I was asked to rate my experience, which I had at this particular department store. And they even sent me a voucher incentivizing me to go back into the store to spend even more money. So these are digital trends which are being picked up by other industries. But what are now the trends which are actually of relevance to the logistics industry? And I would like to draw your attention first to the left side of the table, of the chart, before we then go to the right side of the chart. So the relevant digital trends in freight forwarding are certainly technological developments. And the colleague from IBM earlier this morning spoke about blockchains, so it's been mentioned over here, obviously, as well. But we talk about artificial intelligence and learning of machines, and eventually also the Internet of Things. And I've been given 15 minutes, and we took talk for 15 hours about the Internet of Things. So my objective today is to tip into a couple of those topics, because we don't have the time to go deeper into certain subject matters. But the second big trend is the automation of business processes. And this is then again where we speak later on about business process improvements and productivity gains. And eventually, digitalization in logistics opens up the opportunity for new business models. And I will share with you how we would like to use digitalization in order to generate additional revenues for our organization. Coming to the right side of the chart. Actually, today in our company, only 2% of our activities are digital. And our 2022 ambition is that more than 20% of our business we will do completely online. And don't forget, we are a traditional freight forwarding company, as Louis said before. And typically in freight forwarding, there are at least 18 touch points until a customer actually expedites a shipment. And we want to move from the sheer 2% of our business today to more than 20% in 2022. Also, with regards to winning new business, we actually see the possibility through digitalization to acquire 30% of new customers through online sales channels. And again, we are a freight forwarding company. We are not a business to consumer company where typically you place your orders online in order to get a product delivered. We would further like to streamline our manual processes. In transportation, there's still too much which we're actually doing physically. The gentleman earlier this morning said he still remembers the times when we were writing T2 documents. When you go into a freight forwarding office, there are piles and piles of paper. And still, also in automotive, we are receiving telefaxes for call-offs, and we have to type the information from a telefax into our system. And we want to completely move away from that in order to have a fully integrated process which is taking away all the manual efforts. And eventually, as I previously touched upon, we want to expand our service portfolio into areas beyond freight forwarding because digitalization allows us to do so. And I would like now to give you the very first example, how we do that. Predicting and optimizing logistics and supply chains through data analysis of 180 million messages per day. That is not something what we can do tomorrow. That is something what we have been doing already for the past 12 months very successfully. So we launched a product which is called GKNI, which is no longer forecasting what's going to happen tomorrow, but it's nowcasting. What's happening now is of absolute importance. And also I would like to refer to the gentleman from IBM, I don't see you right now in the audience exactly, where you said it's about trust, having real live data available at all time. This is what nowcasting is all about. Where we are leveraging on the largest possibly inventory of logistics data available from public sources such as airline, ports, the weather forecast, but also our proprietary data. And being one of the largest companies in the world, we have a lot of data available. And what are we doing with the data? We are using the data in order to improve productivity, in order to improve predictive, to advise predictive forecasting information to our clients. So when it comes to global coverage, the product is actually looking into the 12 largest consumer markets of the world, looking into the 6 most important industries, including automotive, pharmaceutical, and high tech. And therefore, we can provide data, nowcasting data, covering more than 50% of the global trade in the world. And to become more specific now, some examples about our initiatives which we are providing to some of our clients. In fact, the first 2 bullet points are for carriers. You know that we in logistics, when we talk to our customers, it's about on-time delivery. And we are getting beaten down if we don't hit the 99.5% or the 89% which have been promised in the contracts and in the KPIs. But all of us also know that the productivity of the arrival of a sea freight vessel is not very good. So sometimes we talk about on-time delivery, but the vessel actually is 4 days late because there's a window. It can be 2 days earlier, it can be 2 days late, and it's still being considered on time. So with GKNI, actually, we are modeling the ETA arrival date of the vessels, which is giving eventually to our customers the possibility to better plan their sales of the next couple of weeks. Also, when it comes to carrier price forecasting, you're using big data in order to help carriers to forecast the price in the market, to set the price in the market. If the price is too low, they are missing out on yield, and if the price is too high, obviously people will buy the product or service from somebody else. Cruise ship provisioning, many of you have probably been on a cruise before, and we do provide the solution to the largest cruise line operator in the world, using predictive analytics by GKNI in order to support the provisioning of their vessels. And last but not least, for a large pharmaceutical company, we are doing dynamic risk assessments for the shipments. Shipments can be very small with regards to kilograms, but the value of the shipments can be extremely high. And again, life may be at threat and a danger if those shipments don't arrive on time at the patient. And we are using this big data, which is now available, in order to assess bookings and to make sure that we are directing the shipment into the right direction, meeting the on-time delivery date. The second example I would like to share with you is how can the automotive warehouse of the future possibly can look like. And I would like to share 5 slides about cobots, about wearables, virtual reality, drones which are equipped with cameras, and eventually autonomous material handling equipment. And for each of these subjects, I prepared 1 slide. And you can see on the top right below our logo, how mature is this solution? How mature is this innovation already in the industry? And then we are also sharing with you in which development phase are we right now before we actually will go to market. And you will see that all of these 5 innovations, none of those innovations are yet mature enough to go out to the mass market. However, cobots. The objective which we have with our pharmaceutical customer over here is that we have to label 2.2 million diabetic products per year. And the way how it's been done in the past is manual. So can you imagine to label 2.2 million products? This is approximately 70,000 products every day. So by the use of a collaborative robot that is very, very easy to implement and also very easy and configurably based, we went into a solution phase with our customer. We are testing the solution prior to actually eventually going to market. And you can see on the picture on the button how the solution is supposed to look like today. And you don't have to be a prophet to foresee the significant productivity gains which can be achieved by the deployment of a cobot. Referring to automotive logistics, when we do sequencing operations, for example, for the new Q5 built in Mexico, where we are responsible for those activities, it's a lot of manual effort yet to be done. Some of preparing the shipments going eventually to the sequencing line, to the assembly line, can be done by robots. And this is something where I believe there's a lot of room for improvements in other parts of the world. I just have been in South Africa recently, visiting one of the American OEM facilities over there. And I mean, there's no technology. Okay, it's still in Stone Age, so to say. So the use of cobots could significantly improve the performance of our customers and our customers' customers. Autonomous material handling equipment. Those little machines which we see over here, they only have a cost of 30,000 euros per piece. We would like to deploy this equipment when we are in the aftermarket warehouse. You see that people are picking and picking and picking. You have some 12 people working there, receiving the orders from all the dealers from a certain zip code or from a certain territory. And eventually, all of you guys, you have seen the cages and they pick and pack the order per customer, per car into the cages. And then towards the end of the day, because things are being delivered overnight to the dealerships, you know, people are physically moving the cages to the loading area. And the problem is not necessarily that we want to reduce the cost of manpower, but also the availability of manpower is, of course, something of utmost importance. And by using autonomous handling equipment, this is something that can be very, very easily be done. And in fact, it can be combined with the previous steps by having cobots actually packing the cages and then delivering those cages to the outbound area. And of course, the process also can work the other way around. Variables. Pick by vision, pick by RFID, and pick by watch. Those are technologies which we are deploying in some of our warehouses. We are still in conceptual phases over here, so we are far away from going to market with these solutions for mainstream. But we are doing this with automotive OEMs in Germany. And the idea is that you pick a product, and should you be picking the wrong product, there's a visual or there's a sound which will tell the picker that he picked the wrong item. So you can see that the benefits are that productivity gains and reduced operating costs are achievable, but also the perception of our workforce. And we haven't spoken about how this will impact, how cobots will impact the workforce of the future. We will have different people operating in the warehouse tomorrow compared to today. So the perception has been extremely high by our workforce. However, we also learned that Google Glass is not the preferred option from all of our workers. People like to work rather with belt solutions, or they take the Pro Glove, where you have actually a scanning device at your glove, and then when you're picking the right item, you're scanning the barcode, and you actually achieve higher quality rates with that particular solution. Drones, and you can see the red over there. This is not yet a mature solution at all. Yes, we have multiple drone projects around the world. The one I would like to share with you here today is that we actually deployed a camera that is taking pictures of the pallet rackings. And it's taking a picture then comparing the storage location with the data label and the warehouse management system to identify is the right product in the right pallet position. So it's one pallet position. It's not the items actually on the pallet. It's only on a one SKU level. And obviously the benefit is that there are faster inventory counts possible. And there are certain other benefits associated to that. However, what you cannot see on this picture is the problem of the battery, of the weight. A drone actually, which has to take pictures, high digital pictures in 3D format, needs capacity. And therefore the drones which we are deploying in some of our warehouses, they actually hanging on a cable which is providing them with the power, and you have a small machine running on the ground, always following the drone in order to make sure that sufficient power has been provided to the device. And then again, that of course is beating the purpose, because you cannot really operate in the warehouse. So therefore, we see certain constraints with that particular solution. However, together with customers, we are trying to make the solution better in the future to eventually then come to a pilot stage before we will go to market at a later point of time. The last slide is a very, very mature solution. Many of you may already have a Samsung virtual reality camera at home. We are using this technology for greenfield projects for our clients. You know, we are going out to you, we are designing a warehouse for you. A warehouse which may have 5,000 square meters or 50,000 square meters. A warehouse operated with 5 employees, or a section of the warehouse, or 120 employees. And we received tremendous feedback from our own workforce, but also from our customers, because we have actually the possibility to take them on a virtual tour through the warehouse, which has not even been built yet, in order to get an idea how the warehouse is going to look like. And again, the benefits are increased confidence in the warehousing operations, but also it's a proof of concept whether actually what we are designing on paper does make sense in reality. Having said so, this was the last of the innovations which we have deployed, and I hope that this information was meaningful or of interest to you. My team and I, we are available outside for any further question and discussion you would like to have with us. And Louis, I managed the time, and I would like to hand over back to you.
Thank you very much, Akim. Thank you very much, Akim, for offering us, showing us the options and solutions, and showing us how Kuehne + Nagel are putting them into practice. So that was an interesting presentation. Next up, I'd like to invite the Director of Supply Chain Consulting from GT Nexus, Varun Nair. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak about GT Nexus, a network approach to supply chain. So as mentioned, I'm part of the supply chain consulting team in Europe, primarily focused with manufacturing customers. So really, to get into this, when you think of, I have listed 3 companies in here, right? When you think of Facebook, think of LinkedIn, think of Waze, and think of what's really unique about them, right? What really differentiates them? Is it the technology they have? Is it the platform? What really is it? What really stands out for each one of them is the network they have, right? I may start a Facebook tomorrow with all the similar features that Facebook has, but I mean, it'll be worth nothing because I don't have the network going with it. So that's kind of the unique thing from a Facebook personal standpoint, LinkedIn more professional, ways more from a maps and connecting everything that's going around from a transport standpoint. Now, if I take a similar analogy over to the business side, and when you think of enterprises, enterprises are constantly communicating with external vendors, right? Enterprises constantly communicating with external suppliers. You have the 3PL, the logistic partners, truck hauliers, ocean carriers, air freight forwarders. You could have custom brokers, banks, right? There are a lot of external vendors that you're continuously collaborating with. But when you think about the external vendors themselves, they are also collaborating with a number of customers. They're not just collaborating with you. Very often they're collaborating with your competitors. They're collaborating with external cross industries, right? Other industries as well. So when you look at it from that standpoint, it's a network of network. You are connected to a network, but your network is also connected to multiple networks. And just continuing along that chain of thought, when you think of supply chain and think of how the supply chain has evolved, I mean, we were at the mini plant yesterday and we continuously kept hearing stories about how everything is getting outsourced now. We manufactured the seats before and now it's outsourced to a supplier. Similar with logistics, similar with many other functions that's provided. From a lot of, I mean, from some of the analysts, this is the data that we have. Close to 80% of the supply chain data is outside of the enterprise. It's managed by external vendors. And when you look at the picture in here, so you kind of see the different players in here. You have the suppliers. There's both the inbound and the outbound flow. You also have the aftermarkets as well. You have the suppliers. There's different flows. You have the LSPs. You could have near source plants positioned more locally or closer or working from an international standpoint. You have DCs, you could have contract manufacturers, third-party distributors, and then you have customers at the end. So it's a complex supply chain, a lot of collaboration between the different players, a lot of data outside of your enterprise. And if I build on it and see traditionally how enterprises have tried to kind of solve the problem, most companies, I mean, typically start first fixing the enterprise. How do I get everything within my enterprise connected well? How do I connect my HR systems, my planning systems, my warehouse management systems, my PLMs? How do I connect everything within my organization so that they all work as seamlessly as possible? Or put it another way, how do I have an efficient ERP? How do I connect everything together? Which is fine. Now, if you extend it beyond that to the 80% data I was talking about, which is your kind of external supply chain, how do I connect with my logistics service providers? How do I connect with my suppliers? How do I collaborate with my customers? How do I collaborate with my trade service providers, which could be banks, it could be custom brokers, etc. In a traditional model, if you think of it, how can you do it? For I mean, in the automotive sector, suppliers just in time, very strategic. Maybe you may do it through EDI, but as you would all know, it's hard work, takes a lot of time. But if it's very strategic, that's an option. Other than that, what are the other options? You could have web portals. A lot of times in a dynamic situations where you want to respond very fast, a lot of times emails, fax, still a lot of that going around, right? Looks something like this. And a lot of scenarios that we come across where it's distributed, new vendors are constantly coming through. Many of these options, EDI for more strategic vendors, otherwise it's web portals, spreadsheets, emails, a lot of things going around. So this is what we are trying to fix. As GT Nexus, we're trying to change this and come up with a multi-enterprise collaboration layer right in between, which allows enterprises or the enterprise layer just to connect to one platform, which then connects to everybody external. So in this case, with the logistics service providers, suppliers, customers, and trade service providers. Today morning, we had this presentation about blockchains, right? Blockchain is the new thing. GT Nexus, we've been around now for 18 years. Obviously, the model is slightly different in the sense that it's a private company managing the whole thing. But the hardest part with anything connecting with the external partners is how do you onboard external logistics vendors. Even when you think of blockchain in a supply chain context, that will be the hardest thing. How do you get external partners to provide data into any platform that you do? And that's what we've achieved, where we've got a significant number of logistics service providers on our platform, a lot of suppliers already connected on our platform, as well as external trade service providers. But the key thing in here, right, some key things. One is how do you collaborate with them? That's one aspect. But in a lot of situations, how do the different service providers between them collaborate? Very often for a customer, those things are not visible to the customer. But if you have a transparent technology layer right in between, you know what's happening between a logistics service provider and a supplier. Or if it's a direct ship, what's happening between a supplier and a customer, or what's happening with the customer broker. So that connection between the service, between the external providers is now also visible to the enterprise. And the same is true for those providers as well, because they know what the enterprise is doing and they can prepare better upfront. How should they respond to it? Any changes in the factory, any changes in the demand, they can all be updated as a single signal, wherein they have access to the order or to the shipment or to the milestones. Just trying to give a different perspective, because you would continuously hear different messages on the same topic. The other fancy word on this is control tower in terms of patterns and challenges. So this is one approach, to look at control tower, where you have your external network, you have your enterprise solutions, and then you try and bring those two things together. A lot of direct connections that we looked earlier, and then have a layer on top. So that's one way of approaching it. Another way, what we would call a next generation control tower, is one where it's a network connected through real-time feeds of orders, shipments, inventory coming from all participants on the network. Multi-enterprise, I think that's key. An instance which holds multiple enterprises together, providing you real-time visibility, not just to you, but to also your external partners. A closed-loop planning and execution system, right? Again, it's closed-loop. Any issue, everybody in the network knows about it. And machine learning, and we hear more and more of that in the last few years. IoT, different names given for it. But to be in a position where any changes with anything, right? I mean, we hear things like ocean life, road life, disaster response, a lot of those things. So being able to utilize the machine learning, not just within your enterprise, but also to your partner network, because they are your strategic vendors in this case. So this really is GT Nexus. So just to kind of simplify GT Nexus, obviously it's a network of various enterprises. So we've got many large enterprises already on the platform. Many of the automotive companies are in there, but we also have that extended network with our logistics providers and suppliers as well. So as you see in there, 350 global enterprises on the platform today, close to now 20,000 suppliers, 750 buying agents. We've got a number of financial institutions on the platform, 29,000 plus truckload carriers. So our legacy in 1998 when started was with ocean. So we have close to 95% of the world's ocean capacity. What this really means is the ocean carriers connected on the GT Nexus platform control nearly 95% of the ocean capacity and over 1 billion messages a year. But then you have more statistics on top as well on the platform. And then I'm not going to spend any time on this, but this is just the solution coverage really from a collaboration aspect. There's a collaboration with the suppliers. There's collaboration with the logistic providers around transportation management. There is collaboration on inventory. And then above all of that, most importantly, there's visibility for the inbound, for the outbound, and as well as for the aftermarkets. And how do you bring all of that? How do you have KPIs for that through an analytics layer on top? And then some customers already on the platform using GT Nexus. So the key element to look at here is when we onboard a customer, we onboard their supply chain. So when a new customer is onboarding, they have that supply chain available. So this is from an automotive and heavy equipment standpoint, but it's a single instance across all industries. So we've got companies, apart from automotive, we've got companies like Nestle, P&G, Dow Chemicals, Syngenta, companies from other industries as well on the platform. So when we connect them, their supply chain is on the platform. So that's how the network grows. It's a multiplier effect as and when enterprise join GT Nexus. So that's a quick overview. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Varun. Thank you very much, Varun. An interesting, again, another presentation looking at it a little bit more technically, but I like the kind of thought of automotive or logistics as a kind of an orchestra and being the conductors of the orchestra, so that was an interesting viewpoint. Next up, I'm very anxious to start as quickly as possible, it seems. I'd like to welcome to the
questions.
Absolutely. I'd like to welcome Alan Braithwaite, the founder of LCP Consulting, which is now part of Bearing Point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. That's the buzzer, is it? It's always worse going last because you find that they've said things that you thought you might want to say. Little bit of an introduction to myself. LCP Consulting, a specialist supply chain logistics consultancy. This year we were acquired by Bearing Point, which has a very strong position in automotive. I personally am obsessed by networks, physical networks. I'm also becoming obsessed by technology, the implications of technology. So I've done 2 meetings in the last month on the technology foresight group in transport, because I also advise and work with the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport on futures. So I wanted to reflect briefly on digital transformation and the UK's supply chains and how that might affect it. And it's how many of you have heard of Moore's law? A handful. Okay, Moore's law is an empirical law relating to the power and capacity of microchips. And basically it says that the capacity and power of a microchip doubles every 18 months. And it has held good for the period in that, I can't see what it is, where is it? 70s. So that's a logarithmic scale graph, and there were some people forecasting that it was going to slow down, but actually there's no evidence of that at all, and the implication is that digital communication is becoming cheaper, and that's progressing at the same speed, that it's becoming therefore more accessible, and the implication of that is that the sort of the wild things like Internet of Things and so on, that a whole joined up world is becoming entirely affordable and will be within 5-8 years probably almost ubiquitous. Everything will talk to everything, and of course it's enabled by as it were, the plumbing. This is an old graph you can see again. This is exponential rate at which the world communicates, whether it's retail or whether it's B2B, business to business. Now, I've been writing about this now for about 6-7 years. The thing that constantly astonishes me is how difficult it is to predict where the next trend's going to be. Because there are so many entrepreneurial people out there, the entry costs are falling. So you know, your app can go on fire and suddenly there's a huge adoption rate. So it's a really tough area to contemplate in. But the implication for transport, and both speakers have really touched on this, logistics services is already huge. If you have your delivery from DPD or whoever, you get your text message saying it's there, so they try and make sure you're in. The guy can handhold it. He'll take a photograph if you're not there when he leaves it on your doorstep. That was unthinkable 5 years ago. Everybody takes it for granted now. If you look at the railways, the opportunities to increase rail capacity through the way in which digital signaling is executed. All of these little nuggets, and what are they doing? They're increasing reliability and they're accelerating speed. And if you're in supply chain logistics, I spend a lot of time lecturing in supply chain logistics, reducing lead time increases reliability and it improves customer service. So just think about it. A business with 0 lead time has, by definition, 100% customer service. So most of what we do has been traditionally trying to buffer against distrust of the next person in the chain. And when I go and work with companies, surprise, surprise, I was doing an interview earlier this week, and he said, this thing about collaboration, he said the toughest people are our own people to collaborate with. And I'm sure a lot of you would relate to that message. So we're seeing these changes, and I'm finding it really tough to know what the next big thing is going to be. I wanted to talk a little bit about the environment, because I think that the policy environment is going to be really, really critical to the next phase of logistics development. So lots of you will be aware of the air quality challenges and the air quality consultations and the implications for both fuel, access to towns, the way in which vehicles will operate in the future. That is going to be regulated out of sight because the government has now been before the Supreme Court 3 times, courtesy of Client Earth, and lost all 3 cases. We're failing on the EU Air Quality Directive, and I know we're leaving the EU, but I still think it's going to have a huge influence. That calls for 0 logistics emissions in cities by 2030. So we have a landscape in which we are responding to the issues of both air quality, but also climate change through regulation that hasn't really bitten yet. So we have that. And then we have at the other extreme, and this was the topic of conversation last week when I was at this meeting at the Department of Business, the growth in traffic, because again, we're very heavily involved with the London Mayor's transport strategy and so on. And these are some graphs I prepared a couple of years ago. We're talking about global production of 100 million, okay? In the UK, what's the fastest growing segment is vans. So the logistics sector is vans. Where the hell are we going to put them? You tell me, yeah? And if you look at the traffic statistics, you see that actually it's a significant part of population. Now, I won't say which big automotive manufacturer was in this meeting, but they said, we are now anticipating that mobility as a service will change the complete buying profiles of the automobile. The things will be done differently, probably within 15, 20 years. And actually that might really dent those growth stats. What's the implication of that? Well, the implication of that is that volume will go out of plants, which means that structures will change, which means that networks will change, which means that the survivors will be the most efficient. That clear? That's where it's going to be. And I redress this slide because I normally talk to retail audiences as well. And what we have traditionally built, because of this lack of trust, because we haven't yet joined up all those signals, is we have traditionally built intermediate warehouse and handling locations, all of which hold some stock, in order to buffer and protect against either real or perceived unreliability. So at the top, you can see this picture, and the discovery that we've made recently is that actually that really accentuates the length of haul. In the future, and this is me flying a bit of a kite, so you'll have to bear with me on that. In the future, we will find, I believe, line-ready material being configured in localities, operating with shared logistics systems across platforms and suppliers, and moving through highly automated, and we touched on the automation earlier, highly automated cross-dock, where actually the handling unit is not interfered with in any way. Because, of course, we can get the signals back all the way from the customer order, not just to the supplier, but the supplier's supplier. So there is an opportunity for everybody to comply. Now that's probably beyond all of our experience, but I reckon that's going to be where it's going to go. I'll probably be retired by then. I should be retired now, but I'll probably be retired by then. But we are talking about radical change in networks. And I wanted to close with some observations about the relationship between industry, which is private, entrepreneurial, and the fact that a lot of the regulation, the road capacity, the rail capacity is in some way state intervened. And this is raising policy challenges which, with my Chartered Institute of Logistics hat on, we're very concerned about. Because it requires that industry talks to government in order to get the right regulatory environment. So just a few of the policy challenges, and they're big ones. We're going to see increased regulation of logistics, operating hours, vehicle access controls, possibly mandated consolidation. Okay, that's going to impact your business. If it's done in a way where there are unintended consequences, because, to be candid, policymakers do not have the first idea of the front end of a truck from the back end of a truck. Okay? You better speak out. Chartered Institute of Logistics is doing its damnedest, but if you guys have got a voice, use it. I know the SMMT is, anybody from here from the SMMT? I've met you before, sorry. Okay, land use planning. We're building tens and tens and thousands of houses. We're eating away at the capacity, and actually in some cases we're making the distances greater. We're disabling that highly immediate solution. So we can no longer depend on the market for that. Government has to understand what the requirements of industry are going to be. And we need a more joined up view in this constrained world. We're going to have to think about competition law in the context of increased collaboration. Because at the moment, everybody gets very nervous about that sort of thing. And then at the technical level, type approval for autonomous vehicles, messaging standards, protocols, and so on and so forth. So there's a huge policy agenda. I'm pleased to say the last two meetings I've been at, I've seen light bulbs going on. But you as an industry, if you have that vision, you should be out there organizing and talking so that government understands, because it has a role to play. It's not going to be a soulless entrepreneurial act in the future. That's me done.
Thank you very much, Alan. Well, thank you very much, Alan, and thank you to all the speakers, all the panel members. Very interesting presentations that reminds us all what it is actually an exciting time coming up for the automotive industry. I've often myself been a critic of the automotive industry and automotive logistics as an industry, that we're not innovative enough. Well, times are changing. We have to be. It isn't, we should be innovative to try and stay ahead. It's actually more a point of being innovative, looking forward to stay in, than mind being ahead, to keep up with everybody else. So I think those are examples of what has to be done, what can be done, and what needs to be done for the industry. So again, it's your part of the session now, I hope, where you ask questions, make comments, agreeing or disagreeing with the panel. So the usual kind of rules apply. If you have a question, raise your hand, wait for the microphone, and when you get the microphone, say your name and your company name, and then make your comment. So we'll start off here at the front with the young millennial at the front there.
Hi, Christopher Kenmore here from Vino. So there's a question for Achim. Talk about the warehousing. You showed various options of pick by glove, pick by RFID, etc. Why didn't you consider pick by voice?
Pick by voice is another technology which is also in place. It hasn't been on the chart. It's also been deployed. There's no particular reason why we left it out. As I said previously at the very beginning, this topic is so heavy. We could talk for hours and hours and hours about even additional innovational trends and tools and methods. So there's no particular reason why it wasn't mentioned.
Okay. A question from me to Achim again probably is, how much of the stuff you were showing, this new technology, what is it, cobot AGVs, pick by wearables, virtual reality, etc., are part of the tenders that you're entering now in the RFQs? Are the car makers or the part suppliers leading the way and saying this is what we want from you? Are they even close to considering and including these in the tenders, or is it completely led by the logistics companies trying to push this onto the car makers and part suppliers?
Okay, I can share with you my experience for the automotive industry, because I don't have insights or significant insight into the other industries. At the end of the day, the cost driver for warehouse tenders is the use of personnel, of manpower. I mean, if we invest into equipment, then we agree with our customer, we buy it, we write it off over the next 5, 10, 15 years, depending on the amount of the investment. But actually what drives the cost is how effective and how efficient can our organization execute the business. Do we need 20 people to run the business? Do we need 2 shift operations, or do we need 25 people and we need 4 shifts? And at the end of the day, we would like to use more of the technology which is available in the market in order to further improve our productivity, which eventually will reduce our cost of production, which will eventually help us to win business. And all those 5 projects, or the 5 cases which I've shared with you, are being done together with our customers in a collaborative approach in order to drive continuous improvement. And I believe there's still a lot of room for improvement for all of us across all OEMs and across all tiers probably, in order to cooperate with the logistics provider, because technology is available, but as we have seen, it's not really deployed yet fully.
Mm-hmm. And Varun, when you're trying to encourage people to use your systems, are you finding that your customers are leading the way and saying, this is what we need, can you provide it to us? Or are you still, I don't know if educating them is the correct word?
So I would say there's been a significant shift now. When we were doing this 5 years ago, when we went in and said cloud platform, everything software as a service, it was all new concept to people. There was a lot of resistance. We've been asked questions, what about security? That was a concern. It's all on the cloud. There's a big security concern because of that. Conversations now are very different. I think most companies that we speak to, they already know about it. I mean, they have a cloud-first strategy. They understand what it means to have everything on the network. Obviously, all the social media platforms have helped. They see the value of that. So in most of the recent engagements that we've had, it's the customer driving it. They want to know, they want to see what's in the network, what they can reuse that other industries are using in many of the situations. So I would say it's very common now.
Can I add?
Yeah, please.
We're engaged in a global warehouse of the future project at the moment, and because there's particularly with that client expanding very quickly, there's a real appetite for the best possible technology, and the challenge that you have with some automation, not a lot of the automation that Akim was talking about, you start getting into handling systems and so on, is the extent to which you lose flexibility in the configuration if the business mix changes. So some of the technology you can apply and is transferable and reconfigurable. Some of the investment, particularly where you start to pour concrete and fix steel and stuff like that, is much less configurable. So it's interesting, for example, that Amazon, their big program is actually deploying robots simply to move the goods to the man rather than having the man to go to the goods. So there's a whole range of flavors in this, which is quite difficult to find a pathway through.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any questions? Question from that side.
Juan Manuel Santiago from Mercedes-Benz here in the UK. I have a question regarding your presentation, Achim. Mm-hmm. Most of the topics are related to transportation, how to move the parts within the warehouse quicker. I never saw flexible shelving racks in the warehouse. For example, now we are facing the electrification. We are going to have to stock batteries probably, handle them, build special sprinkle systems, train the people. The warehouses are normally not ready to be so flexible, you know? Mm-hmm. So either we go to a new place, we rent a place, mm-hmm. we extend the current place with the uncertainty of what is going to happen in 15 years, yeah? So do you see trends in terms of making the warehouses much more flexible in terms of stocking?
Okay, thank you for this question. When we look at an after-market warehouse, look at the bumpers, for example. The bumpers are also not going via the warehouse. They're simply too big. You know, they go directly from the manufacturer eventually to the garage. When it comes to the battery storage, which you mentioned before, I don't recommend that we put the batteries in the same warehouse where we have the remaining stock, simply due to the danger of the commodity. I mean, lithium-ion batteries are dangerous. If they catch fire, you cannot exempt the fire. You know, they will burn and burn and burn. So for that particular reason, I believe that the supply chain for the batteries in particular needs to be separate. And I believe that by now we have enough critical mass, we have enough vehicles on the road, or we will have soon enough vehicles, electric vehicles on the road, which justify a separate supply chain just for the batteries. And you're right, if you store a battery next to, I mean, they are strict storage regulations, and they vary from country to country, even with regards to how much quantity you can store, what's the distance you need to keep between other goods, etc., etc. The laundry list is very, very long. So to answer your question precisely, I believe specifically for the storage of batteries, we need to go to separate locations.
Yeah, but in parallel, if we sell a lot of vehicles, electric vehicles, we will not sell any more filters, mechanical items, correct, less oil, mm-hmm, that are now in our warehouse. Mm-hmm. So let's say we are going to move to a new warehouse and not use completely the current one. So this is, for me, one of the big challenges, you know. Mm-hmm. I would prefer, or what I have in my mind is how to make the current place much more flexible.
But then you pay less. I mean, if you have less space, then typically you pay less, unless it's your own operated warehouse. Typically, with freight forwarding organizations, you have a certain pallet position, but the pallet position may be an oil filter, not an oil filter, it's a bad example, but maybe one SKU today, but once it's been picked, you know, the warehouse automatically allocates another commodity into that location. So it optimizes the usage of the space, and that for that particular reason, I don't think that there's any gains or any losses with regards to separating those two supply chains.
Just to follow on from that, just about the battery transportation, it's something EVs are growing, or the manufacturer sale of EVs are growing. You've talked there, Achim, about the warehousing and storage of batteries. Mm-hmm. But you also mentioned at the beginning that that's something that your company are trying to build a specialization in. Can you just share a little bit more about the challenges of logistics for batteries now that they're going to be such an important part of the automotive industry?
Well, the reason why Kuehne+Nagel decided to build a solution for the entire life cycle of lithium batteries is a demand from the market. As we all have seen from previous presentations, the number of electric vehicles is rising significantly over the next couple of years. And we identified and heard from our customers that there's no reliable and secure supply chain in place to handle these dangerous commodities. And again, you all heard about the explosions which can happen with an electric battery, whether it's an e-bike or whether it's just a small mobile phone, but there's always life at risk if something happens. And nobody, or very few people so far, thought about the aftermarket. What actually are we doing once a car comes back to your aftermarket, for example, and you need to replace the battery? A mobile phone battery, you can, if you wanted to, just throw into the garbage. But with a battery, with a car battery, with a new electric vehicle battery of 350 kilograms, you cannot do that. But there's a value. The most important part of the vehicle is the battery. And there's no reliable supply chain for mass transportation in place. And for that particular reason, we have a solution now developed in the market. Predominantly right now, it's working out of Japan, Korea, into Germany, and we are growing our chain solution into other markets together with our customers. So this is not a solution where you call and say, I have a battery which needs to fly from A to B, or I have a cell which needs to be transported 50 kilograms from A to B, but we are providing a solution, we're developing a solution together with our customers, whether it's for the aftermarket, for the second life, to collect the used batteries from the dealers, to bring into battery stripping, into recycling stations eventually. It's a whole integrated life cycle logistics.
Okay, thank you. Questions? This bloke here.
This question is perhaps for Professor Brathwaite, but others to comment on. And apology if it's kind of specific, but it's been talked about in the Brexit negotiations of one solution of being a kind of virtual border, right? So where, in the case of we come out of the customs union,
Yep.
And this is also talked about in NAFTA now too. I mean, Trump is kind of backing away from the wall, and there's this talk of using virtual borders and things. So in terms of freight, obviously, this would somehow automatically be able to check goods and do these processes. And I mean, is this something that sounds feasible from your view, and in what sort of time scale are we talking about? Because I suppose this could become a very relevant thing in the next couple of years.
Absolutely feasible. It's being widely discussed. So if you follow the Chartered Institute of Logistics website, you'll find our commentary to government on this. It requires, and just a fascinating statistic, if all of the vehicles coming through the Dover Straits were held for a day for inspection, we would need 260 kilometers extra of tarmac to hold them in, okay? Sort of puts it into context, 260 kilometers, yeah? So that's clearly impossible, even if we sent some of it to France. We have to be able to keep the goods moving, and the authorities are aware of this. The systems are being put in place. There is a concern as to whether they've been tested. One of the things that everybody in this room should be doing, if they're not already, is actually going up what's known as the AEO, Authorized Economic Operator, capability. Because at the moment in the UK, from memory, there are only about 600 companies registered, whereas in Germany, they're numbered in thousands. So So, and regardless of whether you're the owner of the goods or the logistics provider or the port operator, everybody needs to have that certified compliance. And at the moment, UK businesses applying, 85% of them fail on the first application. So I would strongly recommend that people go up that curve. I'd strongly recommend that you connect with your own industry association, Chartered Institute of Logistics, hear what's being talked about, but it is firmly line of sight, if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Do you, Akim, do you want to add? No?
Any more questions? Okay, a question from my side is trust. That was mentioned a few times. And that sprang to mind just now because when I went to get my drink from the table over there, and when I tasted it was actually water. So whichever one of you's got my gin, I'd like it back. But we're in the middle of the trust economy now. And I think one of the issues in the automotive industry is where if it's possible for any business to be over-competitive, you know, there's not enough collaboration, if any, and there's also an adversarial relationship between suppliers, whether they're parts suppliers, logistics service providers, and the car makers. So are we, and how do we overcome that trust issue with the customers?
I don't think there's a trust issue between customers and logistics service providers. It's my personal opinion. If there was a trust issue, then we have a really issue. But for that particular reason, I cannot. That's my opinion.
Okay.
I don't know whether you guys agree with that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, as a technology provider, for us, I mean, we look at it as enablers for trust because we make information more transparent. We bring about that transparency with respect to suppliers and logistics providers, between enterprise customers and suppliers, and between logistics providers and suppliers. So, if anything, I mean, that's kind of how we look at it. As you make more and more information visible across the supply chain, the trust kind of grows. So that'll be our point of view.
Mm-hmm. And I think I'm with Akim that by and large the levels of trust on the current model are okay. I think that it's when you start to think about really compressing the supply chain, becoming moment dependent, that you're then very concerned as to whether your partner can deliver. And if you want to try and introduce new solutions where actually you may be sharing resources and so on, then that becomes a trust issue. So I think it's we did a piece of work a couple of years ago in a big automotive plant here in the UK, and we actually measured reliability, and some of the reliability was outstanding, and some of it was truly awful. And what did they do? The ones that were truly awful, if they couldn't replace them, they compensated. So in the new world, you won't be able to compensate. So it prejudices the view going forward.
Okay. Any more questions? On the far side, please.
Hello again. Lee from Jaguar Land Rover. I don't want to throw a grenade or anything, but do short-term contracts, because I keep hearing about all the investment in new technologies and advancements and innovation and the rest of it, are short-term contracts from the OEMs impacting on the ability of the service providers to deliver all of this?
To deliver innovation?
To keep delivering it.
I mean, as we have seen from the few slides I shared with you guys, some of the cost of some of these innovations is very, very little, where the upside potential is in my opinion, tremendous. So therefore, obviously, every logistics provider, when it comes to warehousing, in order to operate space, we would like to have long-term contracts which are of benefit for both parties, because over the contract period, you constantly try to improve your performance. So if there's a possibility for us to have an only 12-month contract period, it doesn't really allow innovation and continuous improvement programs to actually evolve and to utilize this potential, because people may then say, oh, it's only 12 months and why should I invest in the first place? So personally, in particular when it comes to investments which are worth a couple of $1 million, it makes sense that there's a long-term investment and a commitment from both sides. We in Kühne Nagel, typically, we operate a warehouse, but we don't own the warehouse. And if we have a warehouse for 10,000 square meters, we would only lease the warehouse or rent the warehouse for 5 years if we have a back-to-back contract with our customer. Otherwise, the risk for us as an LSP is simply too high that afterwards we have a half-empty warehouse and then the cost would be eating us up. So to be specific to your questions, I believe in particular when it comes to innovation, if you want to have a climate which fosters and allows continuous development and testing, probing new innovations to make the performance of the automotive industry better, the longer the contract, the better.
Thank you.
If I could add to that, the structure of contracts is actually probably the key, because there are some assets and some capabilities of the long term, and there are some assets and capabilities that are extremely tradable, totally fungible, can be replaced almost instantly. Very often, these are bundled in the contract term without understanding the components of value that each one brings. So Achim's absolutely right. If you want a long-term relationship with somebody who is going to, for example, provide the control tower, that's not the work of a moment. There's quite a lot of highly customized investment. But the truck that lands on the dock is, relatively speaking, a transferable asset. Some of the tools and technology are, some of them aren't. So it's how you structure that contract.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, well, maybe one more question from me to Achim. You talked about cobot, AGV, pick-by-wearables, drones, and virtual reality. You're hosting and sponsoring the gala dinner tonight at the Harry Potter World Museum. You never mentioned magic wands.
It's still a secret project.
Okay, sorry. Well, maybe they're keeping that under the invisibility cloak or whatever it's called. Yeah. Just a couple of housekeeping points before we close. Someone left their iPhone in the coffee station area. So if you can just look around you, if anyone's trying to check their emails on a coffee cup, it might be easier to spot him or her. But the iPhone is at our registration desk. I tried earlier to find the person whose iPhone it was. How do you do that? The most obvious. I called the number, but unfortunately the phone was right next to me, so that didn't do any good at all. But I'd like to thank our panel for a very interesting presentation, or 3 very interesting presentations looking forward. Thank you. At the start of the next session, we'll be doing some voting. Some questions for you all to really get a feel of what the automotive logistics industry thinks about important issues that we're facing in the future. So please log on to the app or whatever you do with it. You'll find the instructions on the screen there, and be a part of the survey we're doing out at the end. I think you'll find it very valuable. But in the meantime, join us for our coffee break hosted by Evolution Time Critical. Thank you.